Hello there. Welcome to Positive Changes, a self-kick podcast. I'm your host, Shelley F. Knight. I'm a former nurse and clinical hypnotherapist, turned podcaster and author of Positive Changes, a self-kick book, and Good Grief, the A to Z approach of modern day grief healing. In each episode, I aim to share my clinical, spiritual, and personal experience to help you feel inspired to create your own positive changes in life. Fear not, it's not just me. Each week, I will bring on a new guest and they will share their authentic story of positive change and the tools that they used on their journey. So, if you're ready to be inspired, let's go. This week on the show, we are joined by the wonderful Tracie Root. Tracie authentically shares her grief journey, which followed the death of her husband. Tracie created so many positive changes and seriously self-kicked her way forward to an amazing life for her and her children.
So finally, about a year and a half after his passing, I started to, grief is like a fog, and you kind of just keep going through the motions in survival mode, working, getting the kids to, stay alive, taking them to daycare, taking them to school, things like that. Finally, about a year and a half after he passed away, I realized, if our life is going to be anything like the life I had imagined before, then I'm going to have to start changing some things.
So please join us as we talk parenting, relationships, planning, growth, weight loss and more. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to present Tracie Root. Today on the show, I am joined by Tracie Root, and she's a coach who helps women break out of playing small. As well as that, she helps entrepreneurs to expand their audience. So a big warm welcome to the wonderful Tracie.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I'm super excited to be here.
Bless you. I love the fact you help women rise. Rise, sister, rise. I'm all for that.
Definitely.
So, bless you. You're helping people now, but you've had such a journey yourself. So please do take us back to when your story started to really change in life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And, I love telling this story. As challenging as it was to live, it really has transformed everything since. And I find that we all have so much in common. So the beginning of this entrepreneurial journey really begins way before that. My first husband and I met when I was 22 and he was 26 or so. And we were together for a very long time before we decided to finally, we bought a house, we got married, we were going to start our family. And soon after our son was born, in 2006, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. And so the next 4 years were a very kind of fuzzy time of life where I was learning how to be a mom, helping him to navigate his illness, getting him to treatments, getting him to the doctor, watching him go through all of that and get sicker and sicker instead of better and better. I was also working full-time in corporate America. I live here in California, so I worked in Silicon Valley, in Santa Clara, which is where many of the tech companies are. And in those 4 years, between when he was diagnosed and when he was passed away, we not only had 2 kids, but all of that surgery and treatment and rising of his illness, and then the falling back of his illness when he got a little better, and ultimately 4 years later, he passed away. So it's a very weird time, truthfully, because, the day-to-day activity is go to work, do your life, hope things are going to get better, as we all do, right? We've all been through some pretty difficult times recently, and we're all hoping day to day that things are going to get better. But in reality, things get better and things get worse, and you never really know what's to come. So after he passed away in 2010, my kids and I had to figure out what was going to happen next. I didn't have any family nearby here in California. My parents lived in Florida. For those who don't know how far away that is, that's 3,000 miles. And I didn't really have any support nearby. So finally, about a year and a half after his passing, I started to, grief is like a fog, and you kind of just keep going through the motions in survival mode, working, getting the kids to, stay alive, taking them to daycare, taking them to school, things like that. Finally, about a year and a half after he passed away, I realized, if our life is going to be anything like the life I had imagined before, then I'm going to have to start changing some things, because I am now the only parent that they have. And I hardly ever see them. And when I do see them, I'm exhausted, and I don't really know how to do it differently with the way that we have our life structured right now. So I was able to find what I would consider my first step, which was looking at my personal physical health. After having 2 kids, many moms can relate. I had baby weight that was 4 years old, but of course I wasn't really healthy before I had the first baby. So I would say that I was quite a bit overweight still, really sluggish, no energy. And again, living this kind of survival mode existence, working all day and no energy. So I decided to start with what I could see in the mirror every day, which was my personal physical health. So I went on what I thought was a diet, like many of us do. And thankfully, what I found actually was a structured program that helped me learn not only that if I changed the way I treated my body from a physical standpoint, if I ate differently, if I started being more active, if I drank more water, but if I also started to think differently about not only myself, but the things that I allow into my mind to feed my mind. And if I started to change those things, then it turned out to not just be a diet. Really, it was more of a personal development program that had a nutritional component, where I lost 55 pounds and went in a whole new direction from that point forward. And that's when I started coaching, because everyone around me was asking me what I had done. They saw the physical transformation, but they also saw the emotional and mental transformation, that I was a nicer person. I was more patient. I was able to, let things kind of roll off my back instead of being so defensive and anxious about things all the time. So it was really not only a physical transformation, but a mental and emotional one across the board.
Thank you so much for highlighting that, because we see people trying to create these positive changes, which is great, but you need a holistic approach. You can't just sort of eat better if you're still thinking, I look like crap. You need to get the balance. You need to sort of have the emotions, the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, the social, the spiritual for some.
All of it.
Yeah. And so I love what you're saying, but you just blew me away when you said, I decided to start with what I could see in the mirror. And that's the key, isn't it? Like, starting with yourself is often the key.
Well, in so many areas, right? We're in a crazy time in our world history. And I think that in a lot of cases, if people really took a good look in the mirror and said, is this, like, I had these 2 kids to grow, right? I needed to grow them from little, unformed humans to grow up to be adults. Like, that's the goal. You're not raising kids, you're raising adults. And if I wanted to be an adult that they could see as a role model, I needed to make sure that everything that I was doing, and this is the pressure of motherhood too, right? Everything you're doing has to be, the way you want your kids to see you. But really, it's more about letting them see you fail and letting them see you evolve, so that they can understand that evolution is necessary and that we all can evolve. And I think that that's where I take things in with my clients as well, is, I definitely used to label myself as a perfectionist. And now I know that there is no such thing as perfection, right? For a human. And the more we realize that, if there's something we're afraid of starting or changing because we don't know if we can do it right, if we can do it perfectly, so we don't start at all, like that's just keeping us small, right? If I hadn't started down that health journey row, I mean, I've done a million diets before and lost and gained, hundreds of pounds over the course of my life, probably. But if I hadn't started again, knowing that I'm going to do my best and I'm going to try, and I may or may not succeed, but I'm going to try anyway. If I hadn't started, like, my whole life would not be where it's at now. And I wouldn't be congruent with my own beliefs in how I raise my family, so that to show them really that it's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, you can't avoid it. So what are you going to do with the fact that they're going to happen? And how do you learn going forward from every misstep that we take in our lives?
I found that so refreshing when you said, like, to show our children that we fail. I think that's so true, because I say the thing about perfection. I say to my kids, like, there's no such thing as perfection. Please just have a try. And I love it. And I don't know if I'm getting it right, but they're certainly listening, because our little youngest daughter, she's 6. And they have spelling tests every Friday at school.
Oh,
and
yes.
She came out a few weeks ago and it's out of 10. I was like, how did you get on with your spellings? And she goes, I got 0. And I'm so proud because no one else got that.
Wow.
And I was just
amazing.
like, I think that's the lesson working. There's no such thing as perfection. And just, as you say, like, start with yourself. And in that moment, she goes, no one else got that score. And she felt so special.
Wow.
And I think that's it. It's just, as
and
long
at
as she
6
tries her
years old,
hardest. Yeah.
And at 6 years old, foster that feeling. You can worry about the spelling later, right? Yeah. You can worry about the academic side of that, but the feeling that she whether or not it's an accomplishment per se, the feeling of that she did something that's unique and special and that's inside her. What a gift. That's amazing. I love it.
I just thought it was so cute. She came out and she was just like radiant, just saying, I got 0 and no one else did. Isn't that brilliant? And I was like,
I wonder if did you talk to her teacher? Did her teacher like spin it that way for her at all? Or did she come up with that?
I doubt it I doubt it in our education system. It'd be lovely if they did.
Well, I would say, I will tell you, so my kids are 12 and 14, almost 15. And my younger one also never really did very well in the spelling department. And it's just something we always said, we'll keep working on it. But you are so creative, because the way that they spell the words was like, that's a very interesting take on how you think that's spelled based on how it sounds. Like, it was always very creative. So I love, all of that. Raising little kids is fun because it's a very interesting time.
Yeah. I think we think we're here to teach them, but I think I've probably learned far more since becoming a mum.
Oh, for sure. And that's the thing, is it's all about having an open growth mindset. Right. If you're familiar with Carol Dweck, who wrote about the growth mindset, I can't think if that's the name. There's the name of the book. We'll have to wrap that up later. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what it's called, but I know that's her name, because the idea of a growth mindset goes back to the perfectionist issue, right? That if we recognize that we can always learn something new, that we will never get to 100 out of 100 in what's possible. Right. And it is like you were saying, the education system, right? It's very measured, and the kids take tests, and, I mean, you're in the UK, I'm in the States. It's different, but at the same time, there's a lot of similarities in the measurement of, did you learn this? Regurgitate it back to us so that you can prove that you learned it. And like, there's some level of value there, but really it's about, did you learn something, not what did you learn, right?
Yeah.
Were you able to see the bigger picture of something? And I think that's where I like to remind my clients, my coaching clients, that we're always learning. Like, you can never get 100% on every test forever for the rest of your life, because like, there's always something more to learn. Whenever I take those surveys that we get in whatever all over the internet, right? What's, on the scale of 1 to 10, how are you at this, right? And my answer, I really have a hard time ever saying 10, because I truly believe there's always room for improvement. So, anyway, yeah, there's always somewhere to grow. And you're right. I really felt like I needed to continue to grow in not only, that whole period of when I went through the physical transformation to realizing how it was affecting my mind and the rest of my life. That was a huge time in my life. That was 9 years ago this summer. And everything shifted from that point, because I had been working in corporate for 17 years. I decided during that time that I had always kind of had these fuzzy dreams about working for myself or doing something different so that I could leave California and move to live closer to my family. My parents are in Florida. My first husband's family was in Louisiana, which is within a long day's drive distance of Florida. So I figured if I moved down there with the kids, I would have family support. They'd be able to grow up with their grandparents, their cousin, their aunts and uncles. And so that became my goal, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. And so when I started coaching, I realized that this was something, given the difference in the cost of living between Silicon Valley and Florida down there, it's a lot less expensive to live there. So I built up my coaching business on the side of my corporate job. And once I got to the point where I could see how that could sustain us in the Florida cost of living environment, I gave in my notice, and a long notice, 3 months. And 3 months later, we packed up and we moved from California to Florida to go start new schools. And I worked for myself. I walked my kids to school every day. I got to go in and help in the classroom. And I got to figure out how to work for myself, which anyone who's gone from a job to an entrepreneur knows that that's a big transition too. So that was a big learning time. Now, the funny thing is, hello, I am here in California again. So I was only in Florida for 8 months. Right before we left, my longtime friend that I've known since I was 17 years old, he and I kind of looked at each other and went, you're leaving. And this is the problem. So we decided to try a relationship where we had been friends, like I said, for 20 years and in touch that whole time. It wasn't like the long lost high school friend or anything. It was someone who we were friends the whole time. And so we did a long distance relationship for about 6 months and decided that, we're already in our 40s. Why? It's not like we need to get to know each other. So we decided to get married, and the kids and I moved back here to California. And that December we got married, and we've been married for over 7 years now. So again, staying open to what's possible. Like if I had just left and we hadn't had that discussion, right? Like it was like the day before we left. If I had just moved to Florida and we hadn't had that discussion, I don't think any of that ever would have happened. And we'd probably still be in Florida and things would be very different. But we didn't. And, you never know what life is going to bring you when you're open to the possibilities around you, for sure.
I think that's such a great reminder. I truly do, because you've gone through a grief journey, which was sort of triggered one awakening for you, and you left the corporate, you wanted to be a mum, like a hands-on mum. I love that. And then you get that beautiful synchronicity that you sort of upheave, move, which is another sort of loss and change. You did that as well. And just as that was about to end, you have this other beautiful synchronicity come in.
Yes.
And I just love it. And what I love it, I just think, if you hadn't been so courageous and made those positive changes, you wouldn't have had all those possibilities. And I just think it's a really wonderful reminder that sometimes you just have to take that leap of faith, or that little step outside of where you are, whether it's your grief, your job, or something.
Yes.
So I truly believe,
I think it's all related. The grief that I went through for losing my husband, and the grief that someone goes through for losing a job or a divorce or a friendship, or it's COVID, right? It's all about, I summed it up the other day like this, that it's all about unmet expectations, right? We thought that life was going to be a certain way. When I married Paul, my first husband, I thought that like we had all these plans, right? As young couples do, right? But all these plans, we were having kids, we lived on a property with some acreage and all kinds of great things. And then things changed. And when we stay open to the fact that things are still going to change, then we can see that possibility. You know, our life together, his life and my life together didn't turn out the way that I thought it was going to. And then after he died, you know, I needed to create something new. And as every step of the way, you don't really know how it's going to turn out. But if you hold on to this is how it's going to be, how it should be, right? That's a big one that a lot of people say, it should be like this. Should is a word, like I have a hard time even saying it in this conversation. I really have tried to eliminate it from my life, because there is, to say that something should be a certain way is like saying you don't have control over how it is. And, you know, I hate to call it a control, because I don't want people to think I'm like a control freak, but the choices that we make our future. And we get to decide what those choices are. So therefore the way that we respond to the way things roll out is really what we have the control, is really the only thing we have control over. If a choice that I make results in a certain way and I don't like the way it turns out, well, I made the choice. I'm going to have to kind of let that be what it is and move on, or, you know, turn a corner and make a different choice. Excuse me. So, you know, that unmet expectation of what it was to be, you know, last year is a great example, that we all thought everything was going to be fine. And then COVID hit. And then we thought that it was only going to be a few weeks, right? And that wasn't true. So that expectation was not met. And then, you know, obviously month after month after month, we had no idea what to expect. I think that's one of the most fascinating things of this last year, is it was so unknown. And that's the first time I think a lot of people experienced a lot of so unknown, because they had a belief of how things should be and everything just kind of stayed there. So this was, so the loss of that unmet expectation of what 2020 would have been, 2020 vision, right? We thought it was going to be this great year. And when that expectation was not met, that's a kind of grief as well. And so the way that we talk about how we feel as we go through all of this process now coming into 2021 and still kind of seeing changes, but maybe not the changes we thought it was going to be, or as fast or as slow or whatever. It's all, there's still unknowns, and you have to kind of sit in the unknown and know that all you can do is make the next right choice for you, which may not be the same right choice for someone else, and see how it turns out.
Yeah. And it reminds me of your words earlier, like, you know, because you're making the choices, and you said that I decided to start with the person I could see in the mirror. And it is that. I think some people are probably thinking, oh, it's hard to make choices because of the ripple effect. Like if I make that choice, you know, like to leave my job,
it
impacts on my husband, my children, you know, my income, my house, my quality of life. But as you say, there are still choices. And as you say, if it goes wrong, make another choice. But well, it sounds simple, doesn't it? But I don't know if it is.
Well, so two things about that, right? One is, you know, obviously a lot of us think through a lot of those ramifications before you make the choice. That's part of decision making, is what are the ramifications? And if you expect it to be different than it is, yes, then you just, you know, then what's the next right choice? What's the next right decision that you can make? And, you know, we don't, you know, because we're not clairvoyant, right? We don't get to just know for any of it. So we just have to do our best.
Yeah. I love it. My first chapter in my first book, Positive Changes, a self-kick book, was called Good Choice. And it just brings it back to what you're saying, which I love. And it's just sort of like every moment you have a choice, you know, like when you wake up in the morning, I sort of wake up and do gratitude. I've got a friend that wakes up and says, what crap's going to be thrown at my feet today? Very different,
Yes.
different, you know,
Yeah.
poles apart, different choices, but there's still choices. So I wake up and I'm grateful for what I have, like shelter of the house, my husband beside me, you know, the children next door. She wakes up, that worst case scenario. But you're always making choices like, do I have coffee? You know, do I have gin
it makes
for breakfast?
me like, I got goosebumps just thinking about starting up with that kind of negative thought process and how icky it would feel.
Yeah.
Just, ugh. You know, because the other thing too is don't forget that not making a choice is a choice.
Yes, the inaction.
Right? Yeah, you know, to decide that I'm just going to wait. Waiting is a choice. Like if you can't decide, you can't make a choice, you're making a choice, because everything is a choice. So you can choose to not act and see what happens without your intervention, or you can choose to make a positive step in the direction that you want in order to get closer to that thing that you want, or that experience, or that result that you want. And in coaching, that's like the black and white, you know, that's how you progress. In life, it's the same, right? The only way that we can move forward is to choose to take a step. Otherwise, we're going to sit here, and what happens, it's, you know, what is it? The Rolling Stone gathers no moss, right? If you sit here, you're just going to gather moss, right? I'm imagining my family's outside my window right now doing some sort of yard work. I don't know what they're doing and I don't care. But I can imagine if I were sitting out there for a long period of time, and the leaves that fall down from the trees, and, you know, with the wind blowing and stuff, and I would just be like covered with debris. And that's not how I want to be. Like, that itches, and it's not good. It feels dirty, right? Let's keep moving so that we get to choose how we change and how we grow, as opposed to things just kind of piling on top of us.
I love that analogy, because as you were saying it, I was imagining these leaves coming down and you're just like dulling your sparkle. You're not shining out, are you? Because everything's just covering you. And I was just like, oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, and I struggle a little bit with the feeling like I always have to be moving, right? So that's part of my learning, is knowing that while my like drive is to take a step and make these choices and don't delay. But at the same time, the choice to be still and be aware is another choice that's different than not deciding, because that awareness and that stillness is about, you know, maybe it's about feeling your body, or maybe it's about recognizing what's going on around you. It's not so much like the lack of choice would be more like kind of just staying covered. And so even if you're still and covered versus still and open would be the difference between that, I think. I don't know if that makes sense. It just kind of came to me.
Yeah, no, I like it. Because I was thinking, like, really, when you're stopping, it gives you time to reflect and have that awareness and see what comes up for you. And there's a difference
kind
between
of staying
sitting
open on the inside, as opposed to, and that's still emotion, right? That's still kind of your spirit moving forward, even if you physically are still. So for me, it's remembering that it's okay to kind of relax and stay, and not always be running to the next thing. But there's a difference between staying and allowing kind of your presence to be open, versus you know, staying and kind of not noticing what's going on around you, and just, you know, binging Netflix, or, you know, crawling in a cave.
No, I love it. So your tools, you started off on this health journey, this kind of process, which I loved. You was getting, you know, starting with yourself, and you're looking at the holistic, spiritual, intellectual, and emotional, you know, the weight and things like that. And I love the change that you've gone from this grief fog into, you know, truly stepping up for yourself, your children, everything that happened thereafter.
Right.
So people are listening today, whether it's through grief or they're stuck in corporate or they're in that money trap or they're, they are the ones sitting there covered in leaves looking like hedgehogs.
Yep.
What would you say they can do today? That one positive change they could make today?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked a lot about making choices, right? And the idea of, if you're not happy where you are, what would be one small step that you could take in a direction that would change that, right? When I started on my health journey, like I said, I started what I thought was just, here, eat this food and you're going to lose weight and you'll, and that's the draw of diets, right? Eat this weight, lose this food, you'll be happy. That was backwards anyway, but you get what I mean. And ultimately the happiness didn't come from losing the weight. The happiness came from being on the journey. So I would say to two things specifically. One is know that there's no such thing as perfect. So you might as well take a step. And the other thing is whatever you choose, if it's in the direction, if you're choosing something that feels right, then do it. Take the step, make the choice and see how it feels, right? Because with everything we do being a choice, we have the power. We are empowered to change our lives for the better in whatever way feels right for us. We don't have to wait to be told how. We don't have to wait to be, to know how it's going to end, right? I think a lot of people are afraid to start because they don't see the end. Yeah. And so if you can just imagine just which direction is it, right? We've got 360 degrees all around us. Pick a direction and take a step. And so for someone who's looking for, a physical, they want more energy, they want some better health. That first step for me and my recommendations is always drink water. Way more water than you think you should be drinking. Just drink it. The second thing, if you're already drinking water, is get better sleep. Right? Those two things can transform your life. If your health is good, but it's your head that is not maybe feeling so great, it kind of still goes back to the same thing. Start with water and sleep, because since I started from a health standpoint, I know how being fully hydrated and well rested affects not only your shape, but your mental state and all of your relationships. So those two things, if you really do them well, can actually change all areas of our life. So that would probably be the first tip that I would give someone in just hey, you have a chance to give one tip. What tip would you give them? I'd say two, because I'm always trying to break the rules.
And that's your choice.
I'd say drink water and get better sleep. And, and ask for help would be the other one, right? Humans are not designed to be solo, right? We are a tribal species, right? We are designed to live in community with other people. And we often feel like we're alone and like no one understands us. And that, yes, we are unique. We have our own unique perspectives, but the benefits of connecting with other people, I think this is the beauty of the pandemic, because the way that Zoom connected us all around the world is actually a gift. As much as people might be tired of Zoom, I could go do a whole nother hour on the benefits of the pandemic, because it helped us be more connected to new people, to realize that we're ultimately not alone. And if we connect with others, we're a lot more likely to succeed in whatever it is we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved Zoom. I've had days of Zoom fatigue, but the little things I want to take from that is that I really hope that when we return to this new normal, that when we have meetings back in person, we still wave at the end like we do on Zoom calls. Bye. Yeah, bye. I've absolutely loved that. That's brightened my day.
Funny?
Yeah, it's lit up my inner child.
I have a space here in Santa Cruz where we host events and people have meetings and stuff. And I'm going to have to remember that as we get a chance to reopen, hopefully starting this summer. And yeah, that's funny, right? Because that's something that it would uplift everyone to do that. And everyone would get a laugh. And we'll all be like, oh, I remember that when we were on Zoom, but I'm so glad we're here together, right? It reinforces the bliss that everyone will be feeling when we are all back together, I think, to add that on.
Yeah, it's just like it appeals to the inner child in me, that little like cute little wave. I just think, yeah, it's the little things, I tell you, Tracie, the little things.
Well, you know what's funny about Zoom is I kind of had this thought process is, you know, you and I are looking at each other face to face, straight on for half an hour, 40 minutes, however long it's been. We would never do that if we were out in person. We'd kind of be sitting sideways and things would distract us and we'd look around and all of that. So Zoom is very intense, right? I think that's why people got Zoom fatigue. People who were new to Zoom got Zoom fatigue very early on, because the hours of this was overwhelming, right? So, so while it's a thing, I think that people don't realize why it's a thing, Zoom fatigue, and the fact that it's about that kind of intense eye to eye watching each other for long periods of time, as opposed to, you know, the computer being on the screen, of course, is a factor, but I think it's more about the face-to-face, you know, flat plane to flat plane conversation that just doesn't happen in person.
No, I think it has been wonderful in so many ways. So speaking of wonderful, bless you, you have a freebie for the listeners today.
Well,
so anyone who's thinking, I can't make a positive change, Tracie's got something for you. So she begs to differ.
Yeah. So, you know, when the pandemic started last year, I couldn't see people in person, of course, like anyone. So I started doing a lot of teaching online, a lot of webinars. And so what I have for the gift is on my website. I've had it there for a little bit. It's a recorded version of a class that I was teaching last year a lot. And it's about upgrading those habits for success. So we talked a little bit about the idea of, you know, drink water, get good sleep, things like that. But really, it's about the decisions that you make. And, you know, because it's recorded and it's only 30 minutes, it's a really easy way to, you know, get a tip, get a piece. You don't have to watch it all in one sitting. Obviously, once you download it, it's all yours. And you can, like, if you're feeling like, you know, I want to try and do something, make some change today, but I'm not really sure where to start. I just need a little uplift. I need a little, you know, boost. That video can give you a boost. And there's a workbook that goes along with that. So you can kind of take some notes and let your thoughts work through, what is it that you want to change? What is it that doesn't seem to be working for you? And how can you make a choice that will take you in a new direction? So I think it's really helpful. I really liked doing it. And it's a piece. It gives you another little flavor of kind of how I work as well, since it was a class that I was teaching. I still teach lots of classes, and I have group coaching programs and things like that. So it gives you a flavor of kind of how I work, in case it might be of interest to people to move forward with even more.
Bless you. Thank you so much. You never know.
My pleasure.
How a story is going to unfold. And when I saw, like, it was about a grief, like your husband died at a very young age. It was like 47, you were 41. Right. You know, I thought it was going to be a real macabre story because, you know, that's the belief, isn't it, around grief? I mean, my next book is called Good Grief, the A to Z approach to modern day grief healing. And it is controversial to many because it says about, you know, spiritual awakening, a second chance at life, new beginnings and things like that.
Yes.
But generally we have a quite negative perception of grief, and it, you know, it does hurt. It's a painful thing to encounter. So I didn't know what to expect, but you've just been so inspirational, you know.
Thank you. Yay. I'm glad. You know, it's interesting. I love that your book, by the way. That sounds amazing. And I think people think grief has to be a big loss. It has to be a parent or a spouse or a child, God forbid, and all those things, right? But really, the little things that happen to us in our lives, just those are grief. You know, my parents got divorced when I was young. The process that I had to go, I didn't recognize it back then, but the process that I had to go through when I was in 4th grade, so what is that, age 10, you know, that's a kind of grief, right? Again, it's about, I thought my life was going to be one way and it's not. And that's what grief is, right? It's, and grief as a word, you know, I think it carries that heavy weight, when really it's about, you know, being sad about what you thought things were going to be. And how do you move through that to get to the other side?
Yeah.
And it happens to all of us. We have a global experience about it right now.
Yeah, no, I was smiling as you were speaking about it, because obviously for the book, I had to try and define what is grief. And so I said that grief is the loss of anything with which we have an emotional connection. So that can be like your health, your partner, your child, your dreams, your money, anything. And I call it mini deaths, because no one's actually died, but part of your life has died that you knew and trusted. And it does trigger a grief response. So if you made, like this year, like we're talking about, if you've been made redundant, you might well grieve, because you loved that, the colleagues, the income, that identity. So mini deaths and grief are everywhere.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And not only the identity and the colleagues, but what you thought things were going to be, right? Your expectation of how your life was going to continue, and then through no decision of your own, it changed. And now what? Right? What choice do you make next? For sure.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved it. I truly have, like I say, because my expectation that was going to be like a grief story, which is really important to share, and you've gone beyond that. So thank you for your inspirational share today.
Oh, yay. I'm glad. Thank you.
Pleasure.
That's wonderful.
Tracie Root, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us here on the show.
Thank you, Shelley. It's been so wonderful to meet you, and thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure you subscribe and leave a positive review. If you would like to create your own positive changes, you can buy Positive Changes, a self-kick book from all online book retailers or from shelleyf.com. If you need a dollop of positivity until the next episode, come like and follow us over on Facebook at Shelley F. Knight, Life Goes On. As always, I've been Shelley F. Knight, and you've been amazing.